He didn't remember her face, but she never forgot his signature. He once ended her career with a pen stroke. Now she was the one keeping his heart beating. What would you do if the person who destroyed your life came back broken and only you could save them? That's not a hypothetical. That's the beginning of Eliza Moore's story, and it starts in the most unexpected place. A quiet community clinic, a stormy Thursday afternoon, and a powerful CO lying unconscious on a stretcher. Eliza wasn't looking for revenge. She was just finishing her shift, checking on post-op vitals, reviewing dosage charts, helping a tired grandmother sit upright in bed. But when those emergency doors flew open and she saw his face, time folded in on itself. Because 5 years ago, Adrienne Cole sat behind a glass desk and signed a letter that erased her future. And now here he was, pale, breathless, fading fast. And she was the only one who could bring him back. In the next few minutes, you'll witness a confrontation 5 years in the making, a buried truth that could ruin a legacy, and the quiet miracle of what happens when forgiveness is louder than failure. This is not just a story about a cold CEO. It's about the human heart, how it breaks, how it heals, and how sometimes it remembers what the mind tries to forget. So take a breath, because everything changes from this moment on. Let's begin. They call it cardiac episode. The medical reports would say sudden myocardial infarction, and his assistant would later phrase it as a minor health interruption. But that day, at precisely 2:17 p.m., Adrienne Cole, CEO of Global Reach, Forbes featured, suit always pressed, ego always ready, collapsed onto a marble floor in the middle of a private clinic's waiting room. There were no headlines, no luxury ambulance, no time to control the narrative, only the quiet thud of his body hitting the floor, and a heartbeat that was slipping away. Inside the clinic, Eliza Moore had just finished helping a child pick a sticker after a checkup. She was halfway through logging vitals when the ER doors swung open, the stretcher rolled in, and the air changed. Male, mid-30s, unresponsive, pressure dropping. She didn't know it yet, but fate had just wheeled in a man who once signed her future away without reading the second page. Her hands didn't shake, not yet. Years of training kicked in, gloves on, mass adjusted, crash cart ready. Her voice was steady. Her steps were certain. But when she leaned over and saw his face, she knew. You see, Adrian was once just a name on a door she passed every morning, until he became the man behind a signature that shattered her early career. She had spent 5 years rebuilding herself, brick by brick, shift by shift, only to find him broken under her care. Isn't it strange how life brings us back to the people who taught us our hardest lessons? Power doesn't mean much when your heart stops beating. Title, status, wealth, none of it matters when you're lying under fluorescent lights with a nurse fighting to bring you back. And that's where the story truly begins. Not in the boardroom, not in a press release, but in a clinic hallway with a woman holding back tears and starting compressions. Sparkles a quiet lesson. We often define people by their success. But in moments of crisis, it's not their power that matters. It's their humanity. And sometimes the people we once dismissed are the very ones we end up needing the most. Because Eliza didn't walk away. She stayed. She saved him. And in the next chapter, we'll return before all of this began, when she was still Eliza Moore, young, hopeful, and unaware that a single memo could rewrite everything. 5 years ago, Eliza Moore wasn't wearing scrubs. She wore soft-pressed blouses, carried a leather-bound planner, and knew the train schedule by heart because she never dared arrive late. She was 24, an entry-level marketing associate at Cole Financial. Quiet, sharp, eager to prove herself. And if you had asked her then, she would have said her dream was to grow with the company. Maybe one day pitch ideas in the boardroom instead of just pouring coffee before them. She believed in hard work, in merit, in being seen. But she learned quickly, some offices aren't built to see everyone. It was a Wednesday. The air in the office felt heavier than usual. Eliza remembered the silence in the elevator, the glance from her supervisor that didn't hold, and then the email, "Please report to HR immediately." She thought it was a mistake, maybe a file update, a benefits form. But waiting for her was a termination letter and the words, breach of protocol, failure to uphold reporting standards. Her hands shook. She tried to explain. She had flagged the mistake. The report had been altered after she reviewed it. She had emails, notes, a voice cracking with desperation. But none of it mattered. Adrian Cole didn't look up when he signed the dismissal. The COO had said it was handled. A small mistake, easy to replace. He didn't ask a single question. And in that single moment, a career ended with one stroke of a pen. For Eliza, it wasn't just a job. It was her savings, gone with severance. Her confidence, shattered by silence. Her identity, cracked by a truth no one cared to hear. She moved back in with her aunt, took temp work in a pharmacy, then nights at a caregiving center. Eventually, she enrolled in a nursing program, not out of revenge, but survival, not to fight back, but to keep moving forward. Because sometimes healing isn't a moment. It's 1,000 quiet choices to start again. Sparkle's a quiet lesson in a world of signatures and systems. It's easy to forget there's a person on the other side of the page. A name isn't just a name. It's a story, a life, a beginning. And when we choose not to look deeper, we risk ending more than just employment. Eliza never expected to see Adrian Cole again, and certainly not lying breathless beneath her hands. But fate, as it turns out, doesn't care for corporate hierarchies. Backhand index pointing right in the next part. We return to the present, where Eliza must make a choice no one trained her for, to save the man who erased her or to let the past speak louder than her oath. There's a moment in every emergency, just before action takes over, when time bends. It's silent, heavy, like the world is asking you to choose who you really are. Eliza stood in that moment. Her gloves were on. The oxygen mask was in her hand. And the man on the stretcher, unconscious and barely breathing, was Adrian Cole. The last time she saw him, he hadn't known her name. Now, she was the only one who knew how to keep him alive. Her mind didn't flash to revenge. It flashed to training. Check vitals. Secure the airway. Begin compressions. But her heart was louder. She remembered the weight of that folder in her lap. The way her supervisor avoided her gaze. The feeling of being erased efficiently, quietly. And now here he was, heart failing, powerless, human. Her hands hovered above his chest. For one long second, she hesitated. Not because she wanted him to suffer, but because she had already suffered, and no one had stopped to notice. But that's the thing about healing. It doesn't ask whether someone deserves it. It simply asks if you're strong enough to give it. Eliza Moore, performing CPR, she said aloud, her voice anchoring her back into the room. And then she pressed, rhythmically, steadily, as if with each compression, she was reminding herself who she had become. Not a discarded junior associate, not a victim of careless leadership, but a nurse, a woman who chose compassion over resentment, a woman who, when given a chance to walk away, leaned in instead. Sparkle's a quiet lesson. Grace is not weakness. It's a quiet power of choosing what's right, even when it hurts, especially when it hurts. Anyone can hold a grudge, but holding someone's life in your hands and choosing to save it takes a different kind of strength. When the heartbeat returned on the monitor, the team let out a collective breath. But Eliza didn't relax. She kept her eyes on Adrian's face, searching for something, perhaps understanding or maybe closure. She didn't find either. Not yet, because when he opened his eyes, he didn't remember her. Backhand index pointing right. And that takes us to the next chapter, when the past stands right in front of you and still doesn't recognize your name. Hospitals are strange places. People come in unconscious and wake up to brand new realities. Monitors beep steadily, for lines drip in rhythm, and outside the window, life carries on like nothing has changed. But for Adrian Cole, everything had changed. He opened his eyes slowly, blinking against the fluorescent ceiling light. His chest felt tight, his throat dry. Machines hummed softly beside him. And then, a silhouette by the window. A woman in scrubs, tablet in hand. Calm, focused. He blinked again. She turned toward him. "Good morning, Mr. Cole," she said. Her voice was even, professional, but there was something in the way she spoke. Not fear, not admiration, just familiarity, like someone who had already decided who he was. He didn't recognize her. Not at first, but Eliza knew this part would come. The part where he stared confused, where he asked questions like, "Where am I? How long have I been here? Who are you?" And so she answered each one, patiently, quietly, because she had rehearsed them in her mind. She didn't tell him the truth. Not yet. She didn't say, "I'm the girl you signed out of your company 5 years ago," or "I'm the one you forgot." Instead, she said, "I'm Nurse Moore. I've been your attending nurse since you arrived." But something in her tone unsettled him. He couldn't explain it. It was like deja vu mixed with guilt he hadn't yet unpacked. "You seem familiar," he murmured. She smiled gently, barely. "Maybe you've seen me around." That's the thing about the past. It doesn't always shout when it returns. Sometimes it stands quietly at the foot of your bed, waiting. Adrian didn't push further, but the look in her eyes stayed with him. Not accusing, not soft, just knowing. Sparkles a quiet lesson. Sometimes the deepest truths aren't spoken, they're felt. We recognize the people we've wronged long before we remember their names. Not because of what they say, but because of how their presence humbles us. Eliza left the room soon after. Adrian lay still, staring at the door she had just walked through. Something about her unsettled him. And though he didn't know why, he knew this wasn't just any nurse. Backhand index pointing right, and soon he'll find out exactly who she is and what he did to her. But first, Eliza must decide whether to keep the truth buried or finally let it rise. Some truths sit in silence for years, not because they've lost their power, but because we're not ready to speak them. Eliza had held hers for 5. She wasn't supposed to get attached. Nurses are taught to stay objective, to treat the illness, not the man. But Adrian wasn't just a patient. He was a file that had once erased her name, the decision that cost her everything. And now here he was, alive, awake, demanding his phone again, barking at his assistant over speaker, sending voice notes like nothing had changed. That was the moment it cracked. The mask, the calm, the silence. "Your vitals spike every time you answer a call," Eliza said, trying to steady her voice. "You're not recovering. You're sabotaging." Adrian glanced at her, annoyed. "You have no idea what it's like to carry this much responsibility." And that's when she said it, softly but clearly. "I have some idea of what it means to lose everything." He looked up, confused, still not understanding. Eliza inhaled, and finally she told him, "I used to work for you, at Cole Financial. I was a junior associate. 5 years ago. I took the fall for a mistake. That wasn't mine. Your COO made the error. I flagged it. I tried to stop it, but I was overruled. You didn't ask questions. You didn't read the appeal. You just signed the letter and moved on. You didn't even know my name." Silence fell, the kind that weighs heavy in the chest. Adrian's expression shifted. First disbelief, then something that looked like shame. "Eliza Moore," he whispered. I remember now." "Congratulations," she said, turning to check his phone. "Now you're trying to destroy something else, your own body, all because you're too proud to rest." She didn't yell. She didn't break. She just stood in the room with the strength of someone who had already rebuilt herself without him. And then she walked out, leaving Adrian alone, with a heartbeat and the first taste of accountability. Sparkles a quiet lesson. We rarely remember the names of the people we hurt, but they remember us. And sometimes they're the ones who have to patch up the wounds we caused, while we learn, finally, how to feel them. Adrian didn't make another phone call that day. That night, he stared at the ceiling, her words echoing louder than the heart monitor. And for the first time in years, he wasn't thinking about mergers or board votes. He was thinking about Eliza Moore and how easily he had written her off. Backhand index pointing right, but this isn't where it ends. Because now he's ready to look deeper. and what he'll find in the company's old records may shake him more than any diagnosis ever could. That night, Adrian Cole couldn't sleep. Not from pain, not from discomfort, but from something colder, heavier, guilt. It didn't come with loud footsteps. It crept in slowly, through the quiet hum of machines, through the echo of Eliza's voice. "You didn't even know my name." He reached for the tablet on the side table. His fingers trembled, not from the four in his arm, but from something deeper, fear. He opened the secure company archive. 3 password resets, 2 security codes, 1 folder buried beneath layers of bureaucracy. Termination, more Eliza. He opened it. There it was. Her name, her title, her end date, reason: mishandling of financial report, breach of protocol, risk to client trust. But then an attachment, a memo dated 2 weeks later, private, forwarded quietly to HR. He clicked it open. Department Manager Calvin Jensen has acknowledged that the erroneous report was submitted from his personal drive. Junior Associate Moore flagged the discrepancy, but was overruled in the final draft. Adrian froze. She didn't make the mistake. She tried to stop it, and it fired her anyway, without a second glance. That single discovery hit him harder than any heart attack. He remembered her now, the girl in the back row of team meetings, always early, always prepared, the one who smiled politely, stayed late, helped interns without being asked. She hadn't been forgettable. She had been invisible, an assistant designed to reward titles, not voices. He closed the file, set the tablet down, and leaned back into the pillows with eyes wide open and breath shallow. He had built his reputation on decisiveness, quick calls, clean breaks, but somewhere along the way, he had stopped asking who paid the price. And Eliza Moore, she had paid the most. Sparkles a quiet lesson. Mistakes don't just live on paper. They live in people. And when we choose convenience over curiosity, we don't just bury errors, we bury lives. Adrian didn't touch the tablet again that night, because now he wasn't thinking like a CEO. He was thinking like a man who'd broken something and finally saw the cracks. Backhand index pointing right, but some cracks don't stay buried. Because soon, Adrian won't just confront the truth. He'll find himself reaching out in a moment of instinct when Eliza stumbles and he chooses to catch her. Hospitals slowed down after dark. The fluorescent lights dim, the voices soften, and the steady beeping of machines becomes a quiet soundtrack to healing. But on that particular night, something else stirred beneath the calm. A storm rolled through the city. Rain tapped against the clinic windows like a clock counting down. And Eliza, tired, focused, still thinking about the man she once feared and now monitored, walked the hallway with a flashlight in one hand and a checklist in the other. She didn't expect the puddle. It was a small leak from the ceiling, a sheen of water no one had seen yet. Her foot slipped. The flashlight flew from her hand, and gravity did what gravity does. But she never hit the floor. 2 arms caught her mid-fall, steady, strong, and familiar. She looked up, heart pounding. Adrian, he was supposed to be resting. He still wore the patient ID band. But there he was, holding her like something sacred. "I heard you fall," he said quietly. "I didn't want to stay still. Not this time. I couldn't just let something happen again and do nothing." His voice cracked, not from weakness, but from something more honest than power had ever allowed him to be. They stood there in silence. Her hand instinctively gripped the front of his t-shirt. His eyes locked on hers, not with authority, not with apology, just presence. Real, undeniable, human. She pulled back gently, cleared her throat. "You shouldn't be out of bed," she whispered. "I'll survive," he replied, offering a soft, almost boyish smile. For a moment, she wanted to laugh, because for the first time, Adrian Cole didn't sound like a CEO. He sounded like a man trying to learn how to care. Sparkles a quiet lesson. Sometimes, healing starts with the simplest gesture, not a speech, not a grand apology, just a willingness to be there when someone falls, and the courage to catch them. She handed him the flashlight, and they walked back down the corridor together, side by side. No words, just footsteps in rhythm. And in that silence, something shifted. Not everything had to be said. Some things could simply be felt. Backhand index pointing right. But words would still come, and so would change. Because in the days ahead, Adrian wouldn't just rest. He'd begin to rebuild. And Eliza would discover someone quietly fighting for the dream she thought she'd lost. Dreams don't always die with disappointment. Sometimes they just go quiet, tucked away in drawers, forgotten beneath bills and practicality. That's where Eliza had left hers. A year before Adrian collapsed in her clinic, Eliza had worked late one weekend and typed a proposal just for herself. A plan for a mobile community health initiative, pop-up clinics, preventative care in underserved neighborhoods. Accessible, compassionate, local. It wasn't polished. She didn't have the right contacts or funding, but it was something she believed in deeply, and that belief had lived in a manila folder at the back of her desk ever since. She submitted it once, on a whim. It was rejected with a generic, insufficient capacity response. No feedback, no follow-up. So she tucked it away and kept showing up for her patients. Because that's what people like her did. They served quietly, even when the world said, "Not yet." Then one morning, Dr. Green stopped her in the hallway, holding a folder with a gold-stamped letterhead. "Eliza," he said, smiling, "your community health project. It's been approved. Full grant, equipment, staff, even mobile units. The Whitmore Foundation signed off last week." She stared at him. "I never resubmitted," she whispered. "I know," he said, "but someone did under a partner organization. Anonymous backing." Her hands trembled as she opened the folder and saw the signature. ACO. Later that evening, she walked into Adrian's room. The folder pressed against her chest. "You knew," she said softly. He looked up from his book, didn't deny it. "I may have spoken to someone." Quietly. "But why?" she asked. "After everything?" He paused. "Because I built things that only serve people like me," he said. "And when I saw what you were trying to build, I realized I'd rather be a part of something that actually matters." There was no speech, no performance, just a man trying, really trying to do the right thing. "I didn't want it to feel like a favor," he added, "or some kind of apology. But it is," Eliza said gently, "isn't it?" He nodded. "It's what I should have done 5 years ago." Sparkle's a quiet lesson. Real apologies don't always come wrapped in words. Sometimes they arrive in actions, quiet, unseen, made not to erase the past, but to begin something better. That night, Eliza stood on the clinic rooftop, folder still in hand. The city lights blinked below, and for the first time in a long while, she let herself hope, not for approval or redemption, but for something more enduring, partnership. And partnership is exactly what Adrian would offer next, not as a benefactor, but as an equal, because the best kind of rebuilding doesn't happen alone. The call came on a Thursday morning. Adrian had just finished helping the clinic organize a shipment of donated supplies, bandages, prenatal vitamins, portable testing kits. It was the kind of morning that didn't look impressive in a quarterly report, but it felt good, real. Then his phone buzzed. The name on the screen, Harold Linford, former board chair of Global Reach. "Adrian," the voice said, smooth as ever. "The seat's open. CO, full reinstatement." The vote was unanimous. There it was, his old life, packaged, polished, waiting for him. The skyscrapers, the headlines, the salary that started with a number no one said out loud. "You've earned this," the voice continued, "but we'll need your decision by Monday." Adrian didn't answer right away, not because he didn't know what to say, but because, for the first time in years, he wanted to take a breath before making a decision. That evening, he climbed to the rooftop terrace of the clinic. Eliza was already there, leaning against a railing, hair pulled back by the breeze. She didn't turn when he stepped beside her. She didn't have to. "You look like you've seen a ghost," she said softly. "I think I saw my old self," he replied. He told her everything. The offer, the vote, the door wide open. She listened quietly, When he finished, she simply said, "Congratulations." "But it would mean leaving," he added. "The clinic, the city, you." He paused, looking out over the neighborhood that had taught him more in 2 weeks than 10 years in boardrooms. "I used to think strength was control," he said. "Power, strategy, winning. And now?" she asked. He turned to her, eyes steady. "Now I think strength is showing up when there's no spotlight, choosing what matters, even when no one's clapping. Success isn't always the view from the tallest tower. Sometimes it's the ground beneath your feet, where you choose to build, to stay, to serve. The world will offer you applause, but meaning, that comes from the lives you touch when no one's watching." He didn't take the job. He didn't make an announcement. He just stayed. And in staying, he did something no empire ever taught him to do. He belonged. But before this story ends, one last truth remains. Not about titles or choices, but about love. And the moment Adrian finally chooses not just to stand beside Eliza, but to walk forward with her. Eliza stood at the podium first, graceful, composed, wearing her nurse's badge like a badge of honor. She didn't talk about herself. She talked about the people, the single mothers, the retired veterans, the uninsured workers who would finally be seen. When she stepped down, Adrian took her place. No tie, no teleprompter, just a folded paper in his hand and something softer in his voice. "I've signed a lot of contracts in my life," he began. "Some worth millions, some that cost more than I realized." He paused, glancing at Eliza in the front row. "But today, I'm here to sign something different." He stepped forward, pulled a small velvet box from his pocket, and dropped to one knee. The crowd gasped, but Eliza smiled through tears already forming. "Eliza Moore," he said, voice low, steady. "You gave me purpose when I thought I was just power. You reminded me that people matter more than numbers. And when I collapsed, you brought me back, not just to life, but to myself." He opened the box. "Will you marry me?" She didn't hesitate. "Yes," she whispered. Then, stronger, "Yes, Adrian. Yes." The applause was loud. The moment was quiet, because what mattered most wasn't the ring. It was a contract they'd been signing all along, day by day, choice by choice, trust by trust. Sparkle's a quiet lesson. Some of the most important commitments we make in life aren't written on paper. They're made in silence, in how we show up, in who we choose to become when no one's expecting it. Love, after all, isn't about perfection. It's about presence. That evening, Adrian and Eliza walked barefoot along the shoreline just beyond the city. The air was cool, the tide calm, and for once, the past didn't follow. Backhand index pointing right. But this isn't just a story about two people. It's a story about what happens when one woman refuses to give up on patience, on purpose, and on people. And that, dear listener, is where we'll end, with a love that didn't begin in perfection, but in healing. If this story touched your heart, take a moment to give a like. And don't forget to subscribe to Mr. Michael's Story for more real, powerful journeys like this one. In the comments below, share just one word that captures how this story made you feel. We read every single one, because sometimes one word says everything. Speech Balloon Red Heart.